The phone rang in the middle of the night, sharp and deliberate, as if the sound itself had claws. Jacob's eyes opened instantly. He didn't need the light to know it was 2:14 a.m. His body still carried the discipline of years in uniform. But this call was different. He picked up, expecting silence or a wrong number. Instead, a voice whispered his daughter's name. Not just her name, her middle name, the one only family ever used. Jacob froze. His heart slammed against his ribs. "How do you know that?" he asked. Voice steady, but eyes narrowing into the dark. The line went dead. He sat in silence, phone still pressed to his ear, every instinct in him burning. This wasn't a prank. This was a warning, and it had begun. Jacob was not an ordinary man. His frame was broad, shoulders stiff from years of carrying both gear and responsibility. A faded scar cut across his forearm, a reminder of a time when silence and courage had been the only things standing between life and death. He had returned home years ago, hoping for peace, but he carried war with him in the form of memory. Now, in the quiet of his small town, his uniform hung neatly in a closet, untouched but not forgotten. To the neighbors, he was just Jacob, the man who kept to himself, who jogged at dawn, who nodded politely at the grocery store. They didn't know the weight he carried, and Jacob preferred it that way. But tonight, someone knew more than they should. Someone was calling him with secrets that were never spoken aloud. Jacob had served 12 years in the army, much of it in deserts where the air was dry enough to sting the throat, and the horizon stretched like an endless test of patience. He had been a leader, not because he sought it, but because silence often spoke louder than orders. His men trusted him. They had followed him through dust storms where visibility dropped to nothing, through villages where every window felt like the eye of a rifle. He remembered the smell of diesel mixing with sweat, the constant hum of tension in his chest, the way the night never felt fully dark because danger was always glowing at the edge of sight. He had lost friends, too many, and each loss was carved into him, invisible tattoos of grief that never faded. He came home with medals that meant little compared to the empty chairs at reunions. His daughter had been the anchor through it all, letters folded neatly in his pocket, her laughter on video calls, even with static crackling across the line. He fought for her, lived for her, and after leaving the service, he promised himself that nothing would touch her. But now a stranger's voice had spoken her name into his ear like a violation. That whisper was more than a threat. It was a trespass into the only world Jacob refused to compromise, his family. The next night, the phone rang again. This time, the voice recited his old unit number. The digits rolled out like they were being read from his own memory. He hadn't spoken those numbers in years. Not to his wife, not to his neighbors, not even to his daughter. Jacob listened, breathing slow, heart sharp as a blade. "Who are you?" he asked. No answer, just the sound of breathing. Then silence. It became a pattern. The calls came at different hours, always past midnight. Always with something personal. His daughter's school, his old addresses, even the names of men who had served under him. Each time Jacob wrote it down, a ledger of secrets revealed. To the outside world, nothing seemed wrong. At the diner, Jacob sat quietly with his coffee. At the store, he nodded politely. But beneath his calm surface, he was calculating, measuring every detail. The threat was invisible, and that made it worse. People would have laughed if he told them. A wrong number, they'd say. A prank. But Jacob knew better. Someone was reaching into his life with precision, stripping away the quiet he had built. And still, he stayed silent, because silence was his greatest weapon. The whispers grew bolder. One night, the caller listed the streets Jacob took on his morning runs. Another, they recited the contents of his daughter's backpack, details Jacob had seen with his own eyes just hours earlier. Every call was a violation, every word a knife pressed closer to the skin. Yet Jacob didn't panic. He didn't rant, didn't scream, didn't involve neighbors or friends. His silence was deliberate. His patience, sharpened by years in combat, became the shield. He began to trace the rhythm of the calls. He logged the exact times, He noticed pauses, patterns in the breathing, even the faint echo of background noise. Every silence told him something. The town went on as usual, unaware of the storm brewing in one man's living room. Children laughed in schoolyards, coffee brewed at dawn, and life carried on in peaceful ignorance. But Jacob lived in a different world now, one where the enemy was faceless but dangerously close. And still he waited, because sometimes silence is not surrender. It is strategy. The final call came 3 weeks after the first. Jacob answered without hesitation. The whisper returned, this time speaking not just names, but an entire memory. A private conversation Jacob had once shared only with a fallen friend. That was the breaking point. Not of fear, but of patience. Jacob pressed the phone closer, listening to the words, memorizing every pause. He didn't respond. He simply noted the faint static, the drop in volume, the slight hum like a generator. The moment the line went dead, Jacob acted. He traced the number through quiet, methodical steps. No rash moves, no loud confrontations. Hours of research, late nights at his desk, piecing together what the silence had been telling him all along. And then he found it. The calls weren't coming from a listed line. They weren't connected to any registered device. They came from a burner phone, bought with cash, registered to no one. An unregistered ghost trying to haunt his life. But ghosts, Jacob knew, only had power if you gave them silence. This time, Jacob broke his. Weeks later, Jacob stood at his daughter's school recital. She sang on stage, unaware of the storm her father had weathered in silence. Parents clapped, the room warm with pride. Jacob smiled quietly, hands folded in front of him. No one there would ever know what he had endured, and that was exactly how he wanted it. The crowd stood, applause echoing through the gym. Jacob rose with them, a quiet man in the back row. No medal shone on his chest, no announcement was made, yet the victory was his. The unknown had tried to break into his world, and it had failed. In the end, Jacob understood a truth that few ever do. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is not the one who shouts, but the one who whispers. But even whispers lose power when met with unshakable silence. The calls stopped, but the lesson remained. The unknown can find you, but it cannot define you. Wherever you're watching from, remember this. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet resolve, the steady patience, the refusal to break even when the unknown presses against you. Comment below where you're watching this story from, and tell us what you felt as Jacob faced the silence. And if you want more stories that honor the quiet battles, the unseen heroes, and the lessons hidden in shadows, make sure to subscribe, because the unknown can find you. But here, you are never alone.